committee. I'd like to begin by welcoming those members of the public and press who have joined us today, although we don't seem to have any public or press at the moment. But if they're joining either in person or watching via the live stream, welcome to this meeting of the committee. The County Council allows filming and photography at its public meetings, so please feel free to take pictures, to tweet or blog during the meeting. But could I just request that members of the committee and the public turn off their mobile phones to silent or vibrate whilst the meeting is taking place. There's no fire alarm test scheduled for today, so if the alarm sounds, please leave by the nearest marked fire exit and assemble in the car park. So item 1 on our agenda, are there any apologies for absence and declarations of interest? Nick?
Thank you, Chair. There are apologies from Councillor Billington, and Councillor Gardner is subbing for him. Councillor Diu and Councillor Goldsack was going to attend as a sub, but has sent his own apologies now, and Councillor Schumann.
Okay, thank you very much. Any declarations of... sorry, Steve. Yeah.
Sorry, Chairman, just wanted to explain Councillor Schumann and Councillor Goldsack have both had medical emergencies this morning. That's why they're not here and weren't able to get another sub. So.
Okay, thanks. I hope they're both okay. Yeah, thank you. Any declarations of interest? Bryony?
Yes, for item 6, I need to abstain from this item. My husband's a trustee of C3 and is one of the fund recipients, possibly.
Thank you. That's great. Thanks. Anybody else? Henry?
Thank you, Chair. Just to make you aware, I think you may have the Vice Chair's microphone as you're currently on screen as Councillor Hilary Cox-Condren. So nothing. I thought I'd just...
That's
no, maybe not an insult, but just to make you aware.
I was going to say that's a great honour, actually, to be... thank you. Thank you very much. Adela, thanks.
Yes, item 6.
Sorry, Adela, go ahead.
Yes, sorry, item 6. Ramsey Neighbourhood Trust is in my ward.
Okay, that's great. Many thanks. So item 2 is we're being asked to approve the minutes of the committee meeting that was held on the 2nd of September as a correct record. Can I ask whether any member disagrees with the accuracy of these minutes at all? No. That's great. I see no objections, so I'll sign them off as approved. A few problems with the cameras, but that's great. Item 3, petitions and public questions. We haven't received any petitions or public questions. So moving on to item 4, this is the Cambridgeshire Household Support Fund, excluding the direct voucher scheme. We actually have 7 recommendations now rather than the 5 that you see on the agenda. And Adrian is just going to take us through this item. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, members. So yeah, really pleased to bring you the report today to explain and propose how we plan to run the Household Support Fund for Cambridgeshire. The rationale for that fund is set out in section 1.3 of the report, and essentially it's designed to provide urgent and immediate support for households who are in financial crisis over the winter period. It is 100% funded by government grant and is valid to be spent by the 31st of March 2022. We draw down the funding based on our expenditure. And as you would expect, it is our intention to make sure we maximise the full value of that grant for Cambridgeshire's residents. So in section 1.3, I've described the eligible spend. It is quite, in some ways, quite narrow in that it is designed to support people's emergency support needs. It can't, for example, fund debt advice or longer term support, but the way we've designed our scheme very much builds on the previous 2 similar schemes, the COVID Local Support Grant Scheme and the previous Winter Support Grant Scheme, by aligning our immediate help with some of our partners' work, for example, CABs, the Cambridgeshire Local Assistance Scheme and so on, that can provide additional support wrapped around this urgent financial help. So it would be good for members to consider this as a holistic programme, and we're looking at a particular part of it today. The total value of the allocation for Cambridgeshire is just above £3.5 million, and members will be aware that the Children and Young People's Committee agreed an allocation of direct vouchers to cover the school holidays between the October half term and February half term next year, so including Christmas and New Year as well. So eligible families receiving £15 per child food vouchers for those holiday periods. The value of that is just above £1.1 million. So today we're asking committee to consider this scheme with a value of £2.457 million. I hope that's clear. It's set out at 1.4 in the report. So I'll just briefly run through, if I may, Chair, some of the key features of the scheme. First of all, we've designed this to be as simple as possible for recipients with as little bureaucracy as possible, but also to maximise the opportunity for households in need, whether that's an individual or a whole family, to get to know about the scheme and to access it quickly, and for the response that we provide to be equally rapid. By its nature, this is about supporting households who are in some form of immediate crisis, and therefore we've not designed a lengthy application process. We've designed multiple routes to secure financial help, and are working with all of our district council colleagues and a wide range of voluntary and community sector organisations that are in touch with potentially vulnerable households to release the funding. We are proposing at 2.4 some eligibility criteria, and that's simply to make sure that the funding, although it sounds generous, £2.5 million nearly, to make sure that that funding reaches the households in most need. But equally, we are suggesting some discretion where appropriate. So the eligibility criteria that we're proposing is that's set out at 2.4.6 for grants made to households of £50 or below in value. All we are seeking is evidence of low income or no income. And the definition that we've determined there is the 60% of the median income as identified by the Office for National Statistics. So the total there is £17,940. But we're suggesting that that's applied per applicant in the household rather than as a total household income, therefore not disadvantaging households with more than one earning adult or indeed single people. And then for grants of £50 and a penny and above, we are suggesting that applicants who are in receipt of one of the means tested benefits or are in low income or no income situation. Accessing the funding will be via a direct application form available on the Council's website, but also from a network of trusted partners that we've already been working with over the past year or so on the previous two schemes. And I've listed those trusted partners at 2.5.2. You'll note that the coverage is mixed across the county, and I think it will be really important if the scheme is approved today that we work closely with our district council colleagues and some of the key VCS, voluntary community sector infrastructure organisations, to build that trusted partner network up much, much further than it's currently displayed. So I would expect and hope that, for example, every food bank would become a trusted partner. DWP themselves would become a trusted partner. Any organisation, to be honest, where there's a touch point with a potentially vulnerable household, we want to be on that list. And eligibility to be a trusted partner is very straightforward. We don't seek extensive due diligence checks because most of our organisations we're already working with, but we do ask them to sign up to the rules of the scheme, obviously. What it enables those trusted partners to do is to essentially make direct awards themselves, so cutting out a lot of the process that an applicant might have to go through if they apply direct to the county council. I've set out in section 2.6 the arrangements that we've put in place to make sure we can mobilise solutions quickly. So food, fuel and water, other household energy and water costs, furniture and white goods, clothing, blankets and towels, and any other circumstance. And in all cases, we've managed to agree a set of arrangements which provides an almost immediate response, either through a voucher arrangement, or paying an energy provider direct via a BACS transfer, providing an oil tank fill-up, or indeed procuring goods from one of 3 providers that I'll explain in just a second for direct delivery to the household. And if all else fails, we do have the ability to issue vouchers that are redeemable for cash, although that won't clearly be our preferred option. Delivery will be in-house. We did explore the possibility of outsourcing the delivery of this scheme to a third party, but felt that actually, well, 2 reasons. One, speed didn't enable us to negotiate on that arrangement, but actually we felt it was more important to hold this in-house so that we can start to build a relationship with applicants where the applicant is willing to have that relationship. We expect there to be a lot of people who will be struggling over the winter who may not be known to services, and I think it would be fantastic if we could build that relationship with the hub team and with other services as appropriate. So we are recommending that the scheme is delivered in-house. We've kept the overall admin costs of the scheme at the level that the Children and Young People's Committee committed to, which is 5%, and in fact the total value comes in at 4.8%. We're in touch with a lot of councils nationally, and many are talking about 10%-ish admin levels. So I'm really pleased we've managed to get ours to below 5%, and I think that it just means more pennies, doesn't it, and pounds to households in need. So hopefully that's a positive. Just to finish, Chair, if I may just explain why we'd like to add 2 further recommendations to the 5 that are already set out on page 17. The nature and timing of the government funding for urgent support to households makes it impossible for us to follow the standard procurement route to appoint bodies to distribute some of the support. And at the time of writing the report, we were still developing the details of the scheme. As you can imagine, it was rather a short notice announcement, and we've had to hastily work to pull together the details. We have, though, sought to achieve best value by market consultation and working with known providers, particularly Family Fund, Caris and AO, the electrical supplier. Following consultation with the interim head of procurement and the monitoring officer, we believe the risk of challenge with this approach is low, and the greater risk is not being able to distribute the funding. And on that basis, I'm asking committee to also consider recommendation F to approve a waiver to the procurement process, and recommendation G to approve the procurement of services from Family Fund, Caris and AO to enable the delivery of the scheme. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Adrian. Any comments? Philippa?
Thank you, Chair. I wanted particularly to comment on section 2. Thank you very much. This is a really helpful report. I'm already sharing it with district councillors so that it's going to inform our ability to respond, first of all, to those who approach us. And in 2.2 and several of the paragraphs, we can see the fingerprints of the pandemic learning all over it, can't we? And I'm sure I'm not the only one in this room who got nobbled straight away by local district council officers as somebody who might be a useful networker. And that's why I'm so pleased that you're making this very clear, that we've not just achieved some of this networking via the district councils, but will continue to do so. So that's great. And working creatively to identify potentially vulnerable households. We know what creatively meant during the pandemic. It had quite a lot to do with data collection, if I remember rightly. I'm sure things have got more sophisticated now than knowing where we had to put the bins out for people and other things like that. But and I'm afraid we've had to sophisticate it even more with new crises that people are facing. I don't think we realise just how bad we were going to be, how bad things were going to get with not just our own domestic issues, but also the fact that we're now accommodating increased numbers of asylum seekers and others thrown into distress by circumstances beyond their control. Just a couple of points. In 252, the Trusted Partner Network, thank you very much for listing those. That's always very helpful and also stops us making suggestions you've already thought of. But I didn't see any reference to the NHS in this. And obviously being on adults and health as well, I know just how much we work hand in hand. In particularly, perhaps the social prescribers could be one of the groups of people it would be quite easy to pass this report to, and that form you mentioned, which is the introduction to the system, without them actually becoming trusted partners or taking on that responsibility themselves. They might well be a useful part of our networking. And as far as councillors are concerned, I would really welcome a nice simple poster, rather like the holiday play scheme, with a QR code that I can stick up in various places or put on social media. And the more user-friendly it is for me to stick up on social media, the more I would like it, because I'm not very good at making things fit digitally. And well done on 5%, I think. I'm sure we all think that we want to do it as much in-house as possible, because basically we're the ones who know what needs doing. Thank you.
Thanks, Philippa. Steve?
Thank you, Chairman. Well, I just want to follow on from that very briefly and say I'm really pleased to see this continues the relationship with trusted partners that we built up over the last 18 months, because that's a crucial relationship that we must nurture and never lose sight of from now on, pandemic or not. And also just to thank Adrian for a very speedy and comprehensive system or package, should I say, that's been developed here, because I think we're probably ahead of the curve in starting this. Goes live tomorrow, which, as I said, is congratulations to Adrian for his speedy work and on this, which we've become used to, I'm afraid. So thank you, Adrian.
Thanks, Steve. Feroz?
Thank you. I just want to thank Adrian and the team for delivering on this fund on such short notice. Great to hear that we've managed to facilitate a workshop in October with our trusted partners to set out the design principles, and also that we will be sharing the data as outlined in 2.54. I know this was a problem during COVID, so it's really reassuring to hear this. It's really important that we identify the households that require urgent and immediate need of our residents, but also vulnerable and isolated, as you point out, homeless people, gypsies and travellers, council and social housing tenants at risk of homelessness, asylum seekers and refugees. So thank you for that. We, the members, are also key contacts for us in the local community. We have ways of calling out for volunteers and have access to social media wherever required. I would also be interested to know how we reach the households that do not claim for these, that we know that should be claiming. So if there's a way we can act on that, I would be really grateful. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Thanks to other members for your comments. I am blessed, as you all know, with an amazing team of colleagues. So this is not just my work. It's important to recognise their efforts. They are brilliant. And they'll be watching this, so I'm sure they'll hear that. And thank you. Yeah, I think it's a comment that Councillor Slatter made and has been supported by the two subsequent speakers, in that I forgot to mention that actually one of the most important things I think that we should do with this scheme is to case find, is to actually be proactive about looking for people who aren't connected to services, that are either newly facing hardship. You know, we know of a lot of families that will, with furlough ending and the UC uplift being cancelled, will find themselves in crisis for the first time. They may not know how to navigate what's a very complicated set of systems and arrangements. But also, as you rightly point out, there are a number of vulnerable groups that won't have the facility or the capability necessarily in their lives to reach out for help. So vitally important we work with support organisations. I think they're slightly different, although can also be a trusted partner, but are slightly different to our trusted partners in that we've got some fantastic council officers who are providing social care support, social care staff that are supporting carers. If you're a carer, you're focused wholly on the person you're caring for. Will you have time to even think about applying for a fund like this? We can do that work through our social care staff. We have some commission services that are working with domestic abuse victims, homeless households, and critically, so too do our district councils. And so at 254, to further your point, I think this ability to overlay data and to start to build a picture of who is vulnerable in a safe and lawful way just enables us to target the scheme to those people that are most in need but that might not come to us.
Thank you, Adrian. Henry, you're next.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question for Adrian, if I may. I'm looking at section 2.4.6, which relates to the eligibility criteria for people applying for the fund. So from what I understand, people who, so the median income for households in the UK, less 60%, which is just under 18,000 a year. I just wanted to ask, do we know how that compares to the median income for Cambridgeshire, and whether that's, because obviously I think the point of the criteria is to make the fund as accessible as possible, but clearly if the median income for Cambridgeshire as a county is less than the median income for the UK, presumably that would be more restrictive, but I don't imagine it is, given we have Cambridge City, which is a high earning, well expensive place to live. So just be interesting to know the comparison.
You've hit the nail on the head, actually, in that Cambridge tends to skew the average quite significantly. I don't have the number in front of me, but it's not dissimilar to the national average. That said, we are obviously worried about those areas of our county that are way below that average, or indeed might be skewed. We know, for example, in South Cambridgeshire, which is deemed to be a relatively affluent area, there are probably households well above that threshold that are still facing crisis, which is why I think it's important we apply appropriate discretion. One of the beauties of having an in-house scheme is that the officers that we will train to engage with applicants will be just that. It will be an engagement where appropriate. So if somebody appears not to be eligible, we will be contacting that applicant and having a conversation with them rather than brushing off the applicant because they don't tick the box of eligibility. So I think it will be more of a problem for areas that are generally affluent and with pockets of deprivation that may not work, whereas in areas where we know household income is well below the median, then it's less of an issue. But we are mindful of that, and that's why we'll be having these conversations with applicants where appropriate. There'll be a significant team of people who will work round the clock, I think, to try and make sure we get the full story before we say no to anybody.
Thank you. Hilary?
Thank you. I think I'm echoing what other speakers have said, I think, really, Adrian, and saying thank you to you and the team. I'm very pleased to support this action and that it recognises that poverty impacts people in so many different ways. I think it's wonderful to see the flexible, responsive, collaborative, swift and very human way of working between councils, partners and residents that has developed throughout the pandemic, really built on for this, I think. I'm also pleased that it's adaptable enough to keep growing as we develop trusted partners. I look forward to more conversations that we're due to have very soon with sustainable food and food hubs to keep developing as we develop the Food Poverty Alliance. And I feel like I say libraries to just like every time I speak, but also really, our libraries, I'm sure that we'll be able to support, for instance, in form filling. And of course, we can support as councillors very much on the ground through our networks and casework and publicising. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Hilary. Lucy?
Thank you. I'll try and be very brief because lots of things have already been said. So thank you. And I will stop there with that one. I've got two separate points. The first is more a point to all the members in this room and for us to keep making to people outside. I think I'm right that this is money which is coming from government only when we claim it. So on this occasion, getting as many people to claim this money as possible is really key, and that actually we really need to be making sure we are letting people know, lots and lots of people know how they can get access to this money, because otherwise money that has been made available by government for families in Cambridgeshire will just sit in the Treasury. It's not as if we will be able to use it after March. So there's a real sense of we all need to make sure that our communities understand how to get this money So, because otherwise it will simply disappear and it won't come to Cambridgeshire at all. So that was the first point I wanted to make, and I think it's an important one. The second thing that I wanted to say, and this may have been discussed at the Children and Young People's Committee, so apologies if I'm repeating something that was said there, but I think a huge number of our poorest families are families with children these days, and making sure that the information about how to access this fund goes out through schools, and not just to parents, but also particularly to teachers, who may be some of the people who start picking up when children come in hungry, when they haven't got the appropriate clothing, I think is really important. So I just wanted to check that that particular route of making sure that families are able to access this. Schools will also be a useful way of helping people to kind of find their way through the system. And I know we have quite good communications with school, but not necessarily always as good as we might like.
Thank you, Lucy. Hilary, do you want to come back on anything?
Yeah, very briefly, just to say that the motion that was passed this week around developing after-school contact as well is really plays an important role in identifying those children and families too.
Well, thank you, members, for all your input into this, and thank you to Adrian and the team for their work on this report. And in fact, members around this table here looked at the early drafts of this, and we've all worked on tweaking it. So it's I think excellent. And as Lucy said, if the money's not claimed, then it goes back to the Treasury, which I think will be a shame, because I think we all know people that in our own divisions and friends and family that will need access to this fund. And I think it is very easy for, Adrian was saying South Cambs is an affluent area, and there are probably people that never would have imagined that they would be eligible for something like this, but if they are, then they should claim for it. We've all had the difficulties over the last 18 months in particular. So I don't see any objections. Is anybody objecting to this at all? So I think we're unanimous on this. I'll take it as carried. Many thanks. Brilliant. So item 5 is the business planning update. Over to you again, Adrian.
Thank you, Chair. Me again, sorry. I'll keep this relatively brief. I think we're sort of at the tail end of the October-November round of committees, so it's possible that members have seen much of the detail in the first part of this report. So if, with your permission, I'll just move straight into section 4 and just summarise briefly where we are with proposals that will come to committee in December. So we are proposing 2 main savings for services that are within the remit of this committee. The first is an additional income line at 4.8 for the registration service. Registration in Cambridgeshire, if we set aside the last 18 months, which has been deeply impactful, has traditionally overachieved on its income targets, simply because we're a growing county, really, and it's a high-performing service, very efficiently run. We believe we can diversify some of our offer to provide a broader range of services to those wishing to have a ceremony, for example. Particularly, we think there's scope to work with our 70 or so venues, registered venues, to help them become and maintain their sustainability, but also to offer a broader range of services to those wanting a ceremony. So that's a £200,000 additional income target that we'll be bringing forward as a worked up business case. And additionally, a £250,000 savings target will be proposed, similar to that we've had this year, achieved through identification of efficiencies across all of our budget lines. The important thing for me to stress to members there is that £250,000 saving will not in any way impact on frontline service delivery, and I'm aware you'll need assurance in the business case of that and visibility of how I'll achieve that, but the savings there are really around efficiencies, making sure we're making good use of vacancy savings and improving our processes. So there'll be 2 business cases that come to you in December for those 2 figures. They are relatively low in value, but proportionate, I think, to the overall budget that this committee holds. And I always say this, I wish I could add a 0 or 2 to the end of those numbers, but we are where we are. There's also a third feature in that table at 4.8, which is the reversal of some temporary funding that the coronial service has had to cope with in-year pressures. We expect to be able to put back into the budget in 23-24 and the following year the £60,000 that's been temporarily placed within that service. Finally, Think Communities is mentioned at section 4.5 and we'll be carrying out some further work on what the proposals might look like for Think Communities following discussions with our district council and other partners over the coming weeks, and we'll bring that to you in due course. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Adrian. Any questions or comments from members at all? Steve, yeah.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a quick request if we could take the two recommendations separately, please. My group very happy to note, but until we see the impacts of the efficiency savings, we would abstain from endorsing the savings. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else at all? All seems very quiet. Hilary, did you want to say something?
Well, really, in a way, just reiterating in a way what we said on the last, in response to the last motion, that I think it's very positive that we continue to take learnings of the last 18 months in sort of streamlining how we work, but still delivering efficiently and building on those partnerships and ways of working.
Thank you. Anybody else at all? Okay, so if we go, sorry, Ian, missed you there, Ian.
Thank you, Chair. Just one quick question, really. With regard to the coroner's service, we are now saying that the backlog within that service will be completed by the end of this financial year. That is the case, is it?
Not quite. So we're on a 2-year recovery trajectory. I should have trouble saying that word today. I don't normally. So yeah, we're a 2-year plan, a pathway to recovering the backlog. Every coronial area across the country has faced huge pressure, as you can imagine, sadly, over the last 18 months, and it's definitely made our backlog a significant one. So we expect by the end of 22-23 financial year to have got back to a steady state. Is that helpful? You're welcome.
Thank you. Philippa?
To expose my ignorance, I'm not quite sure what a backlog from the coronial service looks like. I mean, I'm assuming we're not talking about bodies piling up or anything awful like that. But I do know that from family experience how distressing a delayed inquest can be. So is it that sort of thing that's happening? Yeah.
It is. I mean, behind every delayed inquest is a bereaved family, and the service and I are acutely aware of that as our members. The definition of a backlog, to be cold about it, is 12 months or longer. A case is considered to be in backlog if it's older than 12 months after the bereavement. We have a number of cases that are older than 12 months.
Sorry to persist and not being voyeuristic, but does this mean that in some cultures where having the body back is so important, there are people even more distressed in some communities? It troubles me, this. We're not just talking about you've not filled the forms in, are you? It is a matter of personal distress.
Yeah, very much so. Although there is an absolute difference between burial and in the case, for example, of our Muslim communities, we have some exceptional arrangements in place that enable burial to happen within 24 hours of the death. So separation from those arrangements and the inquest taking place, and that it's the inquest itself that is deemed to be, if it's 12 months beyond the death, it's considered to be in backlog.
Okay, thank you very much. Any further comments before we go to the recommendations? Jan.
Yeah, thank you once again, Adrian. You've done a splendid job, you and your team. As over the last 18 months, 20 months, you've done a remarkable job. Yes, and I agree with Philippa. It is distressing, but sadly, we've had quite a lot of murders in Cambridge over the last 18, 20 months. It's sad, but well done to you and your team.
Thank you, Jan. Well said. So if we move to the first recommendation, which is to note the progress made to date and next steps required to develop the 2022, 23, so 26, 27 business plan. All those in favour, please show. Thank you. That's carried. Recommendation B, which is endorse the budget and savings proposal within the remit of the committee as part of consideration of the council's overall business plan. Those in favour, please show. Thank you. Any against? Anyone against? And any abstentions? Okay, thank you. That's carried. Brilliant. Thank you, Adrian. And Elaine is way up the other end of the room. We can just about... It's dark up there as well. I can't see very well, but the lights have gone off. You have to wave. Yeah. So item 6, Elaine Matthews, the Think Communities Area Manager, will now present a report containing recommendations for the Innovate and Cultivate Fund. Elaine.
Thank you, Chair. It's really lovely to be here. It's really lovely to be here, and it's lovely to see you all. So this very short paper just gives you the outcome of the Innovate and Cultivate recommendation panel that took place on the 13th of October. And I would like to personally thank 7 elected members from this committee who took a really brilliant active role in that recommendation panel. It was so good to see you really taking an active part in thoroughly examining those applications and understanding what those organisations are trying to do. I couldn't have been happier with your contributions, so thank you very much for your time. The paper here just sets out for you the outcome of the panel. So we considered 12 applications, and as a panel we agreed that 9 of those Cultivate applications met all the criteria, and we'd like to recommend them to go forward for funding. They're listed in 2.2 of your report, so I'm not going to go through all the names there, but if you don't mind, I would like to just briefly pick out a few little points from each of those 9 applications, the things that really excited the panel, but also excited the service leads who've been supporting these groups to come forward with projects so that they can achieve their ambitions. So at Appendix 1, you'll see there we've given you a summary of all of those 9, and I'll just pick out a few small points there. So the first one is the C3 Church, and that's a wellbeing programme that includes working from the rural community hubs. And as we've heard through the papers that Adrian's presented today, this sort of local engagement in those areas is so important for us now. And to see people and going to where people are instead of expecting them to always come to us. So this was a project that really excited the panel. The Wellbeing Coordinator role is looking to expand that early intervention one-to-one support with pupils who are at risk of exclusion. And we're looking to ensure that families that are supported throughout COVID, including those household financial disruptions caused by COVID, are well supported in those areas. That particular project applied for £15,000, which is the upper limit of the Cultivate grant. The next application that we'd like to put forward to support is from Campsite. And this is a service that will benefit mainly Fenland residents of all ages, those who are living with blindness or low vision. It's a mobile unit that will deliver activities that help people to stay independent and feel confident with where they're living and how they live their lives. And a key element of that outreach support will be the home visiting service. So yet again, it's a really excellent service that's going to where people are, so that we're looking for those people, we're helping them be confident in their own home and helping them to live in the way that they want to live their lives. The next application is from Haddenham, and it's called the Men's Potting Shed. And as a panel, we had quite a discussion of whether it has to be just men or whether it could be men and women or any member of the population. And it's called Men's Potting Shed, but actually it's open to all within that community. For that particular project, their application was for 3,545, but when we looked at the application in a lot more detail, it actually mirrored the Innovate and Cultivate project idea that we advertise on our own website, that we've already looked at the benefits that that brings to communities. And in fact, it was such a neat model with the project proposal that we already advertised, that as a panel we felt that really the maximum grant offer would have to mirror the one that we've advertised, and so we would like to suggest that that particular grant offer is for £2,000. The next application we considered was from Headway, and this is about improving wellbeing outcomes for people with mental health problems, but also physical disabilities, cardiac, brain injury, and that chronic pain. It's a Fenland-based programme, and it's looking to work with around about 60 people, but it will be open to all Cambridgeshire residents. The next application that we'd like to recommend is from King's Hedges Family Support, and this is to help local families to recover from the effects of the pandemic, and in particular focusing on services to children from 0 to 3 years old and their parents. In particular, this was a project that really excited all the panel members, but also the service leads who've been working with this group to look at how they can provide that much needed support for that cohort. It's looking to address those barriers for those very young children who were affected by lockdown, who haven't had the same sort of social interactions that normally would expect to see from that young age. And it's addressing the barriers to speech and language and emotional literacy that they may face. So really helping them to be school ready and increasing their social mobility for those children, those disadvantaged families. But it also gives us that brilliant opportunity to create that trusted working relationship with the household and the family. As we've talked before about how important it is that we make the most of those conversations. It's not just about one thing. It's about us as service leads really understanding that family and their complex needs and making sure that therefore we can signpost them to other support and other help there and really take that wraparound support role. The next project I'd like to bring your attention to is from Ramsey Neighbourhood Trust, and this was a project that's called Boxing for Wellbeing. It's something that's been tried elsewhere, it's tried and tested, and it's been really successful in other areas. And Boxing Futures would like to bring this to Ramsey. It provides 3 terms of 10 weeks boxing fitness sessions with a trained coach, and also the additional youth worker support, which also gives them one-to-one sessions with the Young People's Counselling Service. This not only addresses the physical health of the young people, but also really importantly, their mental health needs, and it will help to improve their social and community relationships. The next project I'd like to draw your attention to is from St. Peter's Church in Yaxley. This is a 2-year project, again requesting match funding for a community youth worker. This is very much in line with our Community Youth Worker Cultivate model. They've been strongly supported by our youth and community coordinators and the youth and community manager, and it's a project that we're really excited about and we feel is much needed in that local area. And then the next project we have there, it feels like a long list, doesn't it? How lovely. The next one we have there is the Edmund Trust. This is a project that helps more people of all ages with disabilities to learn more skills, to become more independent and improve their confidence. This particular project will be based at Eddie's Day Service provision in March in Fenland. And then the last one that we'd like to draw your attention to is the Young People's Counselling Service, who have put in an application for funding to provide therapeutic counselling and create therapy sessions for children and young people in Wisbech. We know there's been an increase in demand for mental health support over the last 12 months locally, and this service will help us to meet that demand. So if this committee were minded to agree to all 9 of those applications that the recommendation panel would like to put forward, that would commit us to a total of £117,286 for this particular round. What that means is the total committed grants out of the 2.3 million allocation would be up to £1,955,517, which leaves us an amount of just over £208,000 of the current fund remaining. That being the case, officers would like to run another round of the Cultivate projects. We think we've got enough money in the pot to do so. The deadline for applications would be the 1st of February, so we'll be maintaining the momentum of this fund and working with some of those community groups who are still working on their project ideas but coming up through those discussion groups.
Okay.
Thank you. That's my proposal.
Thanks very much, Elaine. Jan.
Thank you, Tom. Yes, I fully support these, and it is fabulous to see so many in Finland. Over the years that we've been running this game, Finland has failed miserably with the innovation culture. So I'm really pleased. I obviously will abstain on voting on them, but I'm delighted they've got their act together and we're getting the funding.
Thank you, Jan. Henry?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, likewise, I'll be supporting this, but just a quick question. I appreciate we've only got just circa 200,000 left in the pot. I'm just thinking, I appreciate we probably will have bids in at the moment that are yet to be judged or yet to be scored. I mean, should we still be encouraging people to bid in at this stage? Because I wouldn't want people to submit a bid. We approve some that are currently in with us, and then the people that we have been encouraging to bid won't have any money left to bid for. So, maybe some clarity from the officer on that.
We actually don't have any more bids in the pipeline at the moment. There's no more applications for us to consider as a recommendation panel. So the panel that we held in October was the final panel for applications received. So the 208,000 is available in total.
Okay, so we should encourage people to bid.
Thank you. It's great to see these, all of these coming forward. I've got one question about what happens next with these bids, which is to do with how they're evaluated and when that happens and how you make a judgment about the impact that they've had in terms of the council services, which I think is part of the remit for the bid. And I would also just like to say that the recommendation that's here is fine in terms of what happens next in new bids. With the council's decentralization program, there may be different ways that gets managed in future. So I think it might be sensible to just hold fire slightly on reopening that. But that's not in today's recommendation. So that's obviously something we can discuss.
Yeah.
So on the evaluation, that would be really helpful.
Absolutely no problem. So all of those applications have had their initial evaluation by service leads in our finance to make sure that actually their project proposals stack up against our return on investment. Otherwise, they wouldn't have got to this stage to be before you. Once a project's been approved, then we move into the next phase, which is we make them the offer formally of whatever the amount is that we've agreed. But there might be some conditions of grant award attached to some of those as well, depending on their project plan and how that was going. They then work with our service leads to make sure that actually their project plan is really robust and it's got sensible targets in it within the appropriate time frame for the funding, which is usually between 1, 2 or 3 years, depending on the size of the amount of funding they ask for. We have a proper monitoring program in place for every single one of our successful projects. So if these were successful, we'd have 91 projects that have been through this and all have to submit monitoring reports. So usually that's connected with their next stage of funding allocation. We don't always pay up front. In fact, we very rarely pay money up front. And then we rely on those monitoring reports for us to decide whether that project's on track, whether we can pay the next instalment, what that looks like, and work with the project very closely. One of the most important things for my team, absolutely, is the learning that we get from these projects and where we can use these as inspirational ideas for other community groups, town or parish councils, or whoever it might be, to think about how they might be able to do something similar in their place. Sometimes they need funding, but often they don't. They just need that inspirational idea and support through other means. So we use that a lot for our learning. It's probably worth me mentioning that at the December committee, we'll be bringing to you the annual report of the Innovate and Cultivate Fund, and that will set out for you a really useful analysis of actually all of those 91 or maybe 82 if you don't agree to these ones today, all of those projects, where we've got to, what that return on investment looks like to us as a county council, but also the learning we've had from that. Picking up on Councillor French's point, we'll be showing you where that geographical allocation has been throughout the life of the fund. So Councillor French has mentioned that Fenland previously wasn't successful. This brings them up to a fairly level stage, but also going into more detail from the monitoring, the type of things that we've learned from that, So some, as we all know, some monitoring might come back to say the project maybe wasn't as successful as we hoped, and we all learn from that. And then there's other projects that have really helped shape our commissioning and the way that we as a council change the way that we commission services and what that might look like. The 208,000 that's left would be the end of this particular fund, the Innovate and Cultivate Fund. That takes us up to the £2.3 million. That's been wonderful to be able to work with. And we're already talking to members about what next. What might that look like? How can we do things more efficiently, better, locally? What might that be?
Oh, thank you. But Elaine answered so many questions there. That was fantastic. So you may well have, you've definitely touched on what I was going to say, which was about the sustainability of the learnings, really, from the project. Steve, I know you were telling us about time banking and how that those successful groups are able to share how they've developed, and it'd be really wonderful to see that continued with the other groups across the county and delivered maybe through think communities or different ways online.
Thank you, Philip.
Thank you. Yes, thank you. Also, thank you for your enthusiasm. Now, as you were going through, I was obviously thinking from the point of view of Cambridge City, which I know best, that you presumably are working very closely with the grant officers and the community. So the other Elaine, for example, who I would be dealing with, if I want money, I go to Elaine Short, and then presumably if she doesn't fit quite what she's got, she goes to you. And there is obviously a two-way thing there. Both they can identify for you the really reliable people and the people maybe who need a bit more help, or even maybe it's just too half-baked to put public money into, and no doubt you've got good relationships building up there. And the other way is, of course, that they can then learn some good practice, because your officers would presumably enthusiastically say, do you know what they're doing over in Finland, because we could try that in Trumpington, that sort of thing. Now, so the people who are doing this that you speak of, these are Think Communities people, are they? I mean, how would I find out who's working in my patch from Think Communities? I've met community connectors, and I'm still feeling my way through how these things work, but how would I find out who a Think Communities person was for me?
So there's two parts to this, really. It's not always a Think Communities person, because often the right person is actually the service lead. So it might be somebody who works in adult social care, who recognises where there might be a local project that's working brilliantly in Fenland, and that could be replicated elsewhere. So there's a number of different people who do support the local projects, and we choose the best person for that particular project. It might be because they're geographically based, such as the community connectors who you have met. And in Think Communities, we actually have the three people that I know you already know well in your patch working on Cambridge City. But we also draw upon the expertise of the rest of the council. So often it could be an adult social care commissioner, or it might be somebody from children's, or a youth and community worker. One thing I would like to mention, because I know some of you aren't as familiar with the fund, is that we always do what we call pre-application advice sessions with people who are really interested about doing something in their area. So we speak to a lot more groups than we actually see applications for. And it's through those conversations and working with those groups that you're absolutely right, we're able to bring our enthusiasm, but we're also really able to take their enthusiasm about what they want to do in their area for their residents and make sure that ambition is being fulfilled. And you're quite right, Councillor, we would often say there might be a better fund for you here, and let's explore that. Often they don't need money, often they just need some time and a bit of officer support. Or in the case of time banks, we do point out that we've helped create a peer support network for the 13 time banks across Cambridgeshire, and they support each other. So it's not always about the money, but we're really always very keen to make sure that where there's some lovely, active community leaders who want to do great things, that we help them achieve that in the best way possible.
Thank you. Elaine, anybody else with any questions at all? No? Okay. So I don't see any objections to this. Does anybody have any? So I think we can take that as being unanimous. Thank you very much. Thanks, Elaine. Item 7 is the Community's Social Mobility and Inclusion Committee Agenda Plan. Adrian.
Thank you, Chair. No changes from the published version.
Thank you. Any questions from anyone? Steve.
Yeah, thank you, thank you, Chairman. I'd like to request, please, if you'll indulge me, that we have an agenda item in December covering partnership working and the Decentralization Program. Partnership working, as members will know, I'm disappointed that the unanimous recommendation from this panel wasn't taken up by the administration to reinstate the word partnerships. Over the last 18 months, partnerships have been so important, and it was previously part of the title of this, of the predecessor to this committee, for a very good reason. It meant, I was very proud to hold the badge of chair of that Communities and Partnerships Committee. It meant everybody knew who was accountable to partnerships. I know Councillor Machini quite rightly mentioned to Council on Tuesday that we have partnership working across the whole council. Yes, of course we do. But somebody needs to be accountable for that, and it needs to come to a committee to be for oversight. And our service director has partnerships in his title. He's the point of contact for partnerships for this authority, and he reports to this committee. So, I think we need some clarity around who is politically accountable for partnerships, where the overall partnership relationship with this authority sits and is monitored, because that clarity seems to have been lost with the loss of the title. So I just welcome an agenda item that articulates that. And intrinsically linked to that is the Decentralization Program that Lucy, the leader, just previously mentioned. The previous administration was working on what we called place-based working. It had been developed over quite a long time, was very clearly articulated to our parish councils at the annual conference last winter, and we had a programme of engagement in all the service delivery areas planned across the whole summer, so that it would have been embedded by now. That hasn't happened, but that void hasn't been filled with any information at all. And I'm aware that parish councils are waiting with bated breath to find out on January the 14th at the annual conference for parish councils what decentralisation means and to see it articulated. And our meeting in December is the last opportunity for that to get visibility here for members before that conference happens. So if we could please have an agenda item that explains what decentralisation means, so that we're aware of what the joint administration's got planned, because it was clearly articulated before what we meant to local partners, whereas now, as far as I know, we haven't seen anything. So after 6 months of planning, Chairman, hopefully you've got something to share with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Yes, I think we're already planning to do that anyway, but thank you for highlighting it. We have met with towns and parish councils, and we do need to finalise, as you say, the 14th of January is a key date for them. So we need to give them an indication of what will be happening. In terms of your suggestion about a report on partnerships, you're looking just to clarify the situation and update members on how that's being managed? Is that what you're looking for?
Yes, how the relationship with our partners is managed from the perspective of the joint administration. But yes, keen to see something on the agenda for decentralisation, Chairman, for December. So it's the last opportunity we've got.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jan.
Thank you. Yes, I'd like to make 2 points. Same as Steve. Have you actually been in contact with Marchtown Council? I'm not aware they have.
I don't think we've been in touch with Marchtown Council. Matt Oliver and I went to a meeting of the Society of Local Council Clerks a few months ago. I'm not sure if they were represented then, but as you know, we met with Fenland Council recently. Happy to meet with Marchtown Council as well.
Okay, thank you. Looking at the 2nd of December, I see that you've got down there for Cambridge's Skills 6-month review. I was privileged to attend the official cutting of the ribbon last week, with the Mayor of the Combined Authority and our MP Steve Bartley. I would like you to pass on to Tanya and her team the hard work that and commitment that they have put in over the last months. It was a very moving, I will say, and the Deputy Chair of the Council, Sebastian, he was there as well. It just shows you the money that we did receive from the Combined Authority. And I believe that was about 18, 20 months ago when we agreed to upgrade the centre. It certainly makes you very humble to have been there and to see what some of the staff have done to achieve with these students. So well done to them.
Yeah, absolutely, Jan. Thank you. I'll make sure that's passed on to them. Appreciate that. Anybody else with anything they'd like to raise or suggest? Okay. Sorry, Lucy.
Just to say that I'm sure you've kind of noted the comments that were made about what you'd like, what members would like to come to the agenda in December. Obviously, what comes to that meeting will be kind of decided. It's just because it's been requested today doesn't mean it necessarily will, because some of that will depend on things that happen between now and December, as is normally the case with agendas.
Yeah, I don't think that we'd have a problem in presenting with an update on partnerships and decentralisation. But yeah, you're right. We've already got quite a lot in the pipeline, so it will probably be a longer meeting than it is today. But I don't think that's a problem. We're very focused on delivering things. So thank you for those suggestions. And the committee's next, as we've already heard, is next going to meet on the 2nd of December. Look forward to seeing you there. Thank you very much.